strategic resilience, consumer goods, real estate, entertainment and retail. This industry underwent tremendous changes during the pandemic years and were most severely affected. There was a shift towards digitization and the resilience on online inventory and e-commerce business increased tremendously. I am pleased to welcome our panelists for today for this engaging discussion on major policy and development changes, as well as an overview on the deals and investments that occurred within this industry. I would now like to invite Dr. Anita Shantaram, founder of EthicsIndia, a Legasis company, who will be the moderator for this session. Dr. Shantaram possesses over 27 years of experience in corporate training and teaching experience. She was certified as leading professionals in ethics and compliance by 𝗕𝗙cI USA after she completed her executive education program in managing ethics in organizations from Bentley University in Boston. In her research work, it includes 7 published papers by her in the area of business ethics, and she is currently working on various authorships in the space of business ethics practices. I would now like to introduce Ms. Preeti Chheda, CFO, Raheja Corp. She has been associated with the KRC Group for over 14 years across various roles in commercial real estate, including equity and debt fund, raising and acquisition of private equity for real estate projects, as well as investor relations and financial reporting. Ms. Chheda is a qualified chartered accountant with over 20 years of experience. She is also a company secretary, a CFA charter holder. She has also passed her uniform CPA examination from Colorado State Board Accountancy, USA. We would now like to introduce Mr. Amit Bhasin, Executive Vice President and Legal Head of Marico Limited. Mr. Bhasin is currently the Executive Vice President and Legal Head, but he also forms part of the Executive Committee of Marico Limited and is responsible for the legal and corporate affairs function of the Marico Group. Prior to joining Marico, Mr. Bhasin was associated with Hindustan Unilever Limited as the General Manager of Legal and Corporate Secretarial. He comes with over 18 years of experience and has worked across organizations in the consumer sector. A company secretary and law graduate by education, he has also completed his post-graduation in sustainable business from the University of Cambridge in 2010. We also have with us today Mr. Munnish Puri, founder and CEO of Rainbox Studios, a division of Rainshine Entertainment. Prior to founding Rainbox, Munnish was the COO with Times of India Group, a company where he focused on managing the group's media and entertainment assets. He graduated from NYU Stern School of Business with MBA focused on finance and international business. Now, I hand it over to you, Dr. Shantaram.
Thank you, Ashni. The past 18 months have disrupted our industry, and despite this, some sectors have shown resilience. Hence, the topic for this panel discussion is strategic resilience, consumer good, real estate, and entertainment. Thank you so much, Preeti, Amit, and Munnish. Really appreciate your taking your time and participating in the 8th edition of the Compliance 1010 event. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Some background. According to the 𝗕𝗙𝗵 and EY report, the entertainment industry has fallen 24% during the pandemic. There have been no big releases. The 2 movies, 𝗕𝗫𝗵 and No Time to Die, are 2 which I am waiting for totally. And with halt in earnings and construction, residential property sales have declined by 79% in 2020. Similarly, the FMCG line also saw a decline of 19% growth during the pandemic. Some positives, with the online content streaming taking center stage, 28 million Indians spent or paid for 53 million OTT subscriptions in 2020, leading to a 49% growth in digital subscription revenues. However, the amount of time that we've all spent on these Netflix and OTT platforms, we still have to go because we've seen so much of the material already that we spend an hour actually hunting for new content. So we're desperately waiting for more and more content. So that's a positive for the OTT medium. In the last quarter, the FMCG industry has seen a 37% value growth. Also, the real estate sales have picked up. I think some of the benefits like ease of reducing of the registration charges has helped. But has it really helped in increasing sales is what we'll ask Preeti, and we'll take that forward from there. So what I want is that, over to Preeti, Amit, and Munnish. You can go in any order, or we can start off with Preeti, and want to hear your opening comments about what this pandemic has been like, how has it impacted your industry, and any challenges you faced, and what did you go about doing differently?
Sure. Thank you, Anita, for this. So I think the last 18 months have been unprecedented for all of us. 18 months prior, I don't think any one of us had even imagined that we are going to go through this in our lifetimes. In fact, when I speak to my parents also, they tell me that even the war times were not as bad as what we've seen in the last 18 months. So that's the magnitude of disruption that this pandemic has caused. Having said that, I think for all corporates, it's been, I would say, a paradigm shift in the way we have looked at things and the way we will be looking at things going forward. The times have been obviously extremely challenging, but I think one big lesson it has actually taught all of us is how to deal even despite such challenging situations. We were thrown into this situation, at least in India, towards the end of March 2020, early April 2020. I'm sure all corporates grapple for the few months, as to how do you go about running business sitting at home, because we were all locked down. And that was something nobody had ever imagined or thought of. But I guess the entire sector, or I mean, not just the sector, the entire India Inc. actually showed that, despite all the challenges which we faced, despite the lockdown restrictions, the business did continue. Of course, it had its own challenges. It's not that it was without any devoid of challenges. But despite that, all the businesses did deliver. In fact, want to set a big example. I myself had done my IPO of Mindspace REIT right in the center of the pandemic. So we did our IPO in July 2020, August 2020. So that's the time when the markets were at the worst. We were right in the center of the pandemic. Everything was unknown. What is the future going to be like? But that's what we talk, when we say resilience, because what actually happened is in April 2020, and ours is, of course, Raheja as a group has presence across all verticals, residential, hotels, malls, and commercial. But to talk specifically about commercial, and I will come to the residential bit that you talked about. But talking about commercial, fortunately for the quality of tenants which we had in our portfolio, we did not see any disruption in the rents continuing. We do have long-term contracts. About 85% of our tenants are MNCs. And we actually saw the rent continuing. And that actually gave us a lot of confidence in going back to investors and actually demonstrating that despite such a big disruption happening globally, we were still able to hold on to our rental incomes. And that actually gave us a confidence of actually hitting the market and doing the IPO. We were, in fact, the first IPO which happened during the pandemic. So that itself talks volumes of how resilient some of the sectors have been despite all the disruption which happened. I think it was a litmus test for the BCPs of the companies. The business continuity plans were to test. While, all this time, organizations have had disaster recovery plans and business continuity plan. But I think never have those plans got tested in the way they have got tested this time. And I think from here on, the way all the IT and the risk management committees of all the corporates are going to look at business continuity plans is going to be very different than what it has been ever. Technology has gained so much of significance in the last 18 months. the way we have been doing business also has changed. The reliance on technology has grown manifold, and that's one reason. Even if you look at the IT companies and their performance in the last 18 months, in fact, if you're talking of resilience, they are the ones who have done the best business in the last 18 months. Because all of us have gone back to technology. A lot of our processes, we've said, no, if we are going to face such disasters going forward, then technology is something which has come to our rescue, and it is going to come to our rescue going forward. Also, I think technology has seen a paradigm shift, and it's going to become, I would say, it assumes center stage for all the corporates going forward. So I think that's one very critical aspect which has happened. And then, of course, Anita, I'll come back, when we discuss this further in terms of what our key learnings have been. But before I get into that, let me get Munnish and Amit also to share their views.
Thanks, Preeti. Thanks, Anita, for the opening remarks. It's great to be part of this initiative by Legasis. So thank you for having Rainshine participate in this. Just taking on the point that Preeti has actually put out, clearly no one expected the pandemic, and it hit the media and entertainment business as much as it did any other. But within the M&E sector globally, clearly there were two aspects that stood out. One was that, within the M&E sector, the theatrical side of content got hit quite badly, and so did out-of-home entertainment. Clearly in terms of facts and figures, the theatrical side shrunk from about 42 billion to about 12 billion, so almost 70%. And of course, in addition to the theatrical side being hit, global producers, content producers who were in the midst of producing content had to come to a halt. Now, rightfully so, of course, it saved many lives, maybe millions of lives, because the decision was made globally in each country as the pandemic spread to actually bring the productions to a halt. So from some way or form, while it was unprecedented, it was also valuing lives, which one appreciates. So that was the silver lining, that I think we saved many lives. Now, with that said, clearly, while these two aspects impacted the global media and entertainment industry, there are various silver linings which came through. And let's start, maybe just stepping back and seeing what happened in the world at large, right? Clearly, the Warner Media Discovery, aspect of coming together has now created an amazing company that is looking to spend over $20 billion annually in content creation. So clearly, that aspect has stood out. Here in India, we've had both Facebook and Google, invest in the Jio platform, valuing it almost at $60 billion. And clearly that aspect has, further provided the impetus, again, on the content side going forward. In addition to that, the most recent merger announced, as we all know it, I'm sure all of us have heard about it, in India, is Zee and Sony coming together with N.P. Singh and Punit Goenka, both who are stalwarts within the media and entertainment business and understand it fully. It's an amazing thing to see come to fruition. If the merger goes through, they'll run a network of 75 channels and almost be one of the top Asian media and entertainment companies. So all in all, there has been a lot of progress, which is sort of taken place on a global level. Clearly, the one aspect that actually sort of stands out beyond this is the point that the digital aspect of content has really sort of accelerated in terms of the business end. We've had PwC, which has put out figures that the digital side is going to grow from a $600 million business in 2018 to almost $1 billion, 1.6 billion by 2023. And some facts and figures, including an MPA Deloitte report, speaks about hitting 2 billion of digital business out of India by 2024. So clearly, the digital side of the business has really grown, and that's primarily because people did turn to it during these difficult times. In addition to that, if you just sort of step back, while the theatrical side got hit quite badly, we had the global streaming players who came in and bought out tentpole films, which protected the downside risk of the content producers, whether it be Lakshmi Bomb, Tufan, or on a global level, Black Widow, the Tomorrow War. All of these were actually streamed first. And I think one should take note of the fact that, again, the digital end of things enabled a lot of risk mitigation to sort of happen. As I say, there's always a silver lining when something bad happens. So I think that was a silver lining for the content and the business. Again, coming back to India, one aspect that stood out, again, as far as content is concerned, is what one saw with Doordarshan. I mean, two of the mythological shows, both Ramayana and Mahabharata, even though they were, produced years ago, had massive viewership, and it was the highest viewership that Doordarshan had ever seen. So clearly, those aspects clearly point to the fact that when the pandemic hit, people did go back to their screens, and if it was in the theatrical screens, it was the nearest screen that was near them, whether it be the phone or the television. So, that stands out. Clearly, the two other aspects of the industry that actually stood out were online gaming and animation, both which have been growing ever since. At our end, at Rainshine, we are a 4-year young company, and for us, we were no exception. We got hit as much as anyone else. We had productions going onto the floor, which had to be sort of called off. But we stepped back, and the leadership here actually stepped back, and the team looked at what are the ways in which we can sort of make use of the opportunity that was in front of us in the most optimistic manner. And for doing so, we actually looked at 3 or 4 aspects of our business that we wanted to build. The first was the content side. We currently have 10 studios across the world, which is out of India, the US, the UK, and growing. So we had all our content creators who went back and started huddling to develop the content. So we've developed a large number of IPs within Rainshine. That was the first thing that happened. The second thing that happened was, as Preeti was saying, you always look at technology enhancements, and we're looking at an industry-first initiative at our end, which 𝗕𝗔 𝗵𝗺𝗃 spoke about in a recent press release, where we're actually developing a proprietary blockchain technology called Rainbox. And essentially, that is going to be an industry first of its kind, where we will actually sort of look to collaborate with many of the industry players through that blockchain technology, and more to come on that in the months to come. In addition to that, we're also looking at new content financing initiatives, whether it's the tokenization of content, which again, 𝗕𝗔 has alluded to in the recent press release, or even media credit, which we will again speak more about in the coming months. So these are the initiatives that we sort of looked at in order to build, further momentous or impetus within our business for the content side. One of the formats that we thought is going to matter going forward, at least from our end, is animation. So on the animation side, we have a trilogy of films that we're developing called Young Captain Nemo, which you will hear about more, which essentially is being created on the basis of a best-selling Amazon book. And the scripting is happening by Jeffrey Reddick of the Final Destination fame. So we essentially are looking at building the animation business going forward. And it's going to be an important aspect of what we do going forward. So what Rainshine has really done is, once again, gone back to the drawing board, buckled up and said, we'd like to be the next generation media and entertainment company that collaborates with content creators, content distributors, and investors globally. And that's really what our focus is going to be going forward. So we've come out of the pandemic, I think, much stronger and much wiser, and to some extent wanting to create more of a positive impact on the industry as a whole. Thanks.
Thanks, Preeti, and thanks, Munnish, for sharing, the wonderful stories and how companies have come out stronger post-pandemic. I think talking about FMCG, I can possibly reflect on it from 3 different constituencies. One being what was happening within companies inside. Second, what was happening with the consumers, which are key for any industry and more so for FMCG. And the third one is the FMCG ecosystem, which is the retailers and the shoppers who are there, what was happening there. I think starting with what was happening within the companies, I can again divide it into two parts. The first wave of the pandemic was very different for FMCG than the second wave, and it was different in the way that nobody ever expected that there will be a crisis of this magnitude hitting FMCG companies. Nobody was prepared to work 100% remotely, operating your factories in a way which are COVID compliant, and it was really something which caught the industry by surprise. So the initial struggle, and all of you would know, was about whether you are selling an essential product or you are not selling an essential product, whether you can send your people to work or not, whether you need passes or you don't need passes, whether your factories can operate or you cannot operate. I think that was the challenges which were being faced by FMCG, and I'm sure other industries were no exception, but sharing the experience, what happened in FMCG in particular here. And I think the entire ecosystem was somewhere not prepared. So these questions were not the questions where the companies were asking themselves, but even regulators were not clear whether they can classify you as an essential or not, whether they can give you a passes or not, or how many employees should be allowed. So I think that was the struggle truly during the first wave of pandemic. I think in the second wave, clearly corporates were better prepared, right? They had built systems, they have gone through a bit of cycle, I would say, and possibly prepared themselves for a second cycle. I think what was not expected possibly was the magnitude of the second wave. And what was not expected was that it will be all pervasive, and it actually, what I call it, came home. It started then hitting the employees, every other employee, their families were impacted, and therefore suddenly the focus moved from operations to lives in the second wave, because every other person in the company is impacted, their relatives are impacted. So you are suddenly kind of arranging for beds, medical facilities, arranging for plasma, arranging for oxygen concentrators. Because in the second wave, and you will remember that operations were largely allowed. Operations were working. They were not like very strict lockdowns or complete kind of block on the business. So to that extent, operations were okay. There were less regulations. There were less need to have kind of passes and all. So operations were working, but the challenge was who will service them. And that's where the people became very important in the second wave. And that's been the contrast in two waves as far as the FMCG is being concerned. I think talking from a consumer point of view now, the consumer behavior changed significantly during the pandemic from a FMCG point of view. A consumer which used to go to a retail shop or to a modern trade, look, feel the product, and then take the buying decision, suddenly everything moved digital, right? The consumer who has never used a digital platform were forced to go to a digital platform. Suddenly you found all the Kirana stores which were not even giving home delivery suddenly started giving deliveries on WhatsApp as well. They were okay to accept kind of orders on WhatsApp. So suddenly the whole dynamic of the ecosystem changed, and I think everybody adopted very quickly to this. But the consumer preferences changed. Consumer were looking for product, and therefore as a corporate, it became very important for you to be present where consumer is. So you don't have a choice to say that I will only sell in modern trade, or I will only sell in retail, or I will only sell in e-commerce, because the consumer modern trade was largely impacted, but retail and e-commerce were kind of open, at least in the second chain. So you need to ensure that you are available, you need to ensure that you are relevant, you need to ensure that you are making right communication to the consumer at that point in time. And coming to the second point, there is that consumers suddenly became very conscious about wellness, sanitation, health. These are the things that took center stage for the consumer and their families, and therefore how you suddenly pivot some of your communication around these aspects also became important for the companies. Some of the things which were essential at a point in time, say for example cosmetics, suddenly it became good to have, right? They were not necessary, and that's why that part of the business got impacted. Out of home eating kind of habits changed suddenly. Everything became in home, and therefore products which were out of home became kind of redundant for a period of time. So I think it was important then for companies to start looking at different models? How do I provide the right kind of assortment to the consumers which are relevant for them at this point in time and send it to them? In fact, there are various models to the extent where the companies took their vans to the societies, to the residential societies to sell product, make them available over there. So various models were tried, and I think some of them possibly will remain for a longer period of time. Some of them were need for the hour. So I think that's what happened from a consumer lens point of view. And I think lastly, from a stakeholders point of view, the invasion of technology suddenly that we saw with wholesalers, retailers, which I briefly talked about, became suddenly very, very important, right? A small vegetable shopkeeper or even the person who comes to supply vegetable to your doorstep became suddenly very tech savvy. They were okay to accept digital payments. They are okay to kind of take orders digitally, and that ecosystem suddenly changed. And obviously the transition that we were seeing in a digital world from this industry point of view has accelerated by 3-4 years during this period. So I think that's what has happened largely in the consumer kind of goods industry, and I'm sure the story will not be very, very different. But those are my opening comments on what happened during the initial phase of pandemic.
Yeah, thanks, Amit. Munnish spoke about the silver lining, and I know of writers who said that this was a time wherein they just focused and they have created so many more stories. They've sat down to write, so we can look forward to even better content in the future. I want to ask Preeti and Amit, can you all see a silver lining in this for your industry?
So, Anita, yes, I think there has been a silver lining to every business, and it's created new opportunities for every business in some form or the other. And since you dwelled upon residential, or in for that matter, today we know that we've had several challenges in the last 18 months since most of us have been working from home. Now, of course, we've all started getting back to offices. But in a country like India, where real estate is not the same as it is in countries abroad. You have smaller houses where we live. We don't have separate studies. Our communication network is not as robust as you see in countries outside. So all of us have had those challenges of, being at home and still, having to deliver. Now, as we see, things pan out, the way the houses are going to be made going forward is going to be different. The way the houses are going to be designed, you are going to ask for spaces, where you have a separate study, however small that be, because we have children at home, we live in joint families, we have parents at home, we have children running around while all of us are working. So now we need to create those spaces, when we are going to face with similar challenges going forward. Similarly, if I were to talk about commercial offices, over the last couple of years, when everybody wanted to, for example, optimize cost, the density, the offices were becoming pretty dense. Now, of course, with social distancing and all becoming critical for everyone from a health and safety perspective, we're actually going to see the offices also going to be designed, with enough of open spaces, a lot of room for people to have those larger spaces to hang out, etc., to create that a more vibrant environment. All of those things are going to happen, which are in a way going to aid the way all these real estate spaces are going to make. And I think overall, as a silver lining, I guess technology is something which I alluded to even prior. That's, I think, been it's going to become very critical for all of us. And in a way, it has actually taught us how do we embed technology in a way we work. I don't think now any business is going to work without technology coming to the center stage, because it's just not going to be possible, because today we are faced with this pandemic. We don't really know what is in the offing as we move ahead. So I guess all of these are going to help us in a way to make our businesses far more resilient and robust. Amit can give his thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Preeti. I kind of completely echo what Preeti has said, and the word post-pandemic is not going to be the same. And there are a lot of learnings in this, and I think a lot of good things have happened. We can call it a silver lining, or we can call it anything else. The fact remains that what would have taken as a society for us for next kind of 5 years has happened possibly in 18 months time. And in all the spheres, right? You look from the sphere of adoption of technology in each of the field that is there on the consumer behavior, you look at it and you see how the schooling has happened. I think in future, we will possibly question a lot of decision making, which we were always used to take for granted. Saying a meeting has to happen or everyone has to be present in physical, then only an important meeting can happen. Right, giving examples of as critical as court hearings, right? And there are lawyers here. Court hearings, we never imagined it will happen virtually, and we can have a senior counsel from one person, one place appearing at the court of others, because that was not possible. So I think a lot of these things have happened, and possibly in the post-pandemic world, we will be questioning ourselves that whether that is the right thing to do and continue with that, because there's an enormous kind of agility, an enormous time of resilience that has come in the process. People have kind of become more innovative in the process. There are so many innovative models which have been launched during this time, because it was need of the hour. What the things which used to happen possibly 48 hours, had taken only 2-3 hours because that was the need of the hour. It became a question of survival for many companies, and therefore they immediately pivoted to that model. So yes, there are a lot of learnings during this, and most of them, to my mind, will continue as well. There will be some calibration that will happen in the post-pandemic world. But if you talk from a point of view that what this pandemic has taught us and what there are silver linings, there were a lot to my mind.
Thanks, Amit. Yeah, Preeti, I see, huge flats, but we spend a little more time in the 50 square feet balcony. I've never seen neighbors having their tea in their balcony and, just looking out that, can I see your face? It's just changed. I remember the thali when we had to make that noise. We were actually thrilled to see people, and people who never ever acknowledged each other also were suddenly waving out. And, so I think it's, given that whole, what you said, the whole space, the change, and we look for different things. So that's the silver lining that you can look for in your industry. FMCG is something, a lot of things, and you all are an established brand. There are so many things which are mandatory, or you need it. So that will never die down. So over to you, Munnish. I always feel great whenever there is a code of ethics which gets mandated, or when a chief compliance officer was again made to be a mandatory position. So that feels most exciting. So when we look at this with the OTT platform, with the code of ethics has been established, it's very subjective. If you very simply define ethics, we say ethics is the ability to distinguish right from wrong and the commitment to do what is right. So we know what is right or wrong, but sometimes sticking to it and actually doing right. So do you think it has come at a timely? Is it timely? Is it going to really have the impact? Is it going to be looked at just as a guideline? If you think of the Vishaka guidelines, I think no organization really looked at it seriously. But when it became the POSH Act, when it became an act, that's when it became mandatory. So will this code of ethics really work? Do you think, how positive is it? Your views?
I think it's a very thought-provoking subject, right? As you, Preeti, and Amit may already know, content is a business of communication. And at the end of it, most of the time it's good versus evil, even on screen, right? It depends on what is perceived as evil by one, and how subjective does one want to be. Clearly, from a self-regulation standpoint, I think content producers, networks are definitely conscious of what the content is. But at the end of it, the creative freedom that has existed. I mean, let's just step back, right? The theatrical side is a public place where people watch content. Television is a push strategy where at the end of it, you get to see what the network's putting out. But here you choose. The digital side is where you actually choose. And I think that when you said code of ethics, what you really meant is the digital side. And, Siddharth Roy Kapoor, who is the president of the Producers Guild of India, had a very nice blog that he had put out recently, where he spoke about the impact that the content side on the digital side is having on the business as a whole, whether it be people who are directly employed, which are almost 8.5 lakh people, up to people who are indirectly employed for content creation, which can be which is over I think 2 million people. The point being that it is a high impact industry. It engages people on the threshold. Netflix has just announced that it's going to create a very huge post-production facility out of Mumbai. Now, these are very, very real examples of where the content business is growing and going to go. It may exceed 2 billion in the coming years. So when you step back, I think one of the areas where content creators have felt the need to be able to self-express has been the digital side. And therefore, yes, self-regulation is more than welcoming. And as you know, there's level 1, level 2, level 3. It would be great if content producers and streaming networks were allowed to have content creators express themselves. And if there was freedom given, it would be most welcoming. Of course, we need to be consciously aware of the fact that we shouldn't be doing anything that is going to be detrimental to certain aspects of what the government is sensitive for. But it would also be good if there were, if there was a list that was put out that said, listen, just don't do this, but then go ahead and then, express yourselves in any way. That would be welcoming, but again, that's my personal opinion, that could happen. As far as ethics are concerned, there is another aspect of it, which is that, you may see at some point a two-step process to access adult content. And again, that is depending on, the viewer and what their aspects are. But clearly, even today, streaming networks are very clear. Before you watch a show, you know what the context of the show is, you know what its attributes are, whether it, God forbid, be, whatever that it is, and you don't want to watch it, you can actually, switch off. But otherwise, you're going to be switched on in because you're choosing to watch that content. So I think, code of ethics on the content side, especially on digital, freedom is key. With that said, yes, parameters can be put out to say, these are really the do nots that exist. Because the last thing you want is for people to be, God forbid, just, going out there and defending lawsuits, etc. It's better to actually grow and nurture the industry and provide the freedom that it really needs.
Yeah. When you're saying do not, and the creative people can always choose and find out some loophole, some gap there in that, because we cannot have an exhaustive list of do nots. Maybe what you're mentioning is some key areas are those which should be that, you cannot show that or you should not. But I feel that it's challenging to have a total do not list because you're after all creative and you'll find a.
Yeah, I don't think that do not's going to happen very exhaustive at all. When I said that, what I really meant is that there could be a limited number of points that are put out where everyone knows that these are areas which are very, very sensitive. And again, with that said, the more the freedom, the better it is, because as you said, these are creative aspects of writers, filmmakers that want to express themselves through the art form of a story. And there should be no element that should restrict them, because that's the beauty of content.
That's so true. What you're saying is it's the most impactful area. I think that's something which impacts our lives maximum. And so the part wherein they talk of sovereignty or you're talking of national issues, you feel that that's a little vague. It needs to be specified a little more clearly when they're mentioning it in the code of conduct.
I think that is going into a bit of specificities because, clearly, I think, that has been spelled out. And I don't think, we are at that place where we can sort of, question any of those aspects. I think one needs to respect what has been put out. It would be, again, great if even within that, there was a box that was spelled out, because we know how forward-looking a film like 𝗕𝗏𝗃 𝗵𝗃 was and the attributes that existed within that film. But still, it went on to winning 4 national awards because the strength of the storyline was seen and the characters were seen, and what its implication was seen. And there were various aspects within that too, which one could have questioned, but they did not, because content stuck with audiences. So that's the power of content. It's also how creatively one produces it or creates it in order to have the impact that it really needs to have. So answering your question, I don't think one can question the government on what they need to do and what they've spelled out. I think one needs to respect that. But it'd be great if, if there was, a limited list of items that were, the do not list. That is, that would be welcoming, yeah.
So rightly put, you can look at a movie and you can find flaws, or you can, nitpick on certain aspects, but if you look at it holistically and you look at the positive, that would be powerful. So asking Amit or Preeti, what do you think, self-regulation or mandatory laws? Across industry, you can just pick it up.
I think if Preeti, I can start, any day for me, self-regulation. I think, and that's a sign of advanced society as well, where you believe in self-governance, and that's to my mind is always more powerful. And there are two examples possibly I can quote. One, this whole space of corporate governance that we have seen under company law, and it has been now being developed for over years. But the companies which were well governed, they have been following it for ages, even when it was not there, right? And some of those best practices actually end up becoming then the law. So actually, self-governance. If you want to do your business ethically, then I don't think anything is there which needs to be mandated, and that makes a better society and a better kind of relationship between the regulator, companies, and other stakeholders as well. So I think corporate governance in India is one such example where we started late, but I think we have come a long way over there, and a lot of it is attributable to how companies just picked up and kind of given suggestion to strengthen that particular field. And I think closer to FMCG than the whole self-regulation system that is there in India for advertising is something which is again a case study in itself on an advertising which has been running for ages in the country. There was never a kind of any regulations over there, but the Advertising and Standard Council of India, which was a body which was made for self-governance, a lot of companies came and joined them, right? And they have also evolved their guidelines. They have evolved their ways of doing with new digital media, with the new things like the reference kind of advertising which is coming. So they have evolved their guidelines along with it, and now they have a force of law from a telecast and broadcasting law point of view as well, right? So I think it started there, and they have now got some kind of recognition as well, and that's the best thing that you can do, where there are rules of the game which the members of the society have decided that we will adhere to and abide by, and that creates a best culture from a inter-industry point of view as well. So for me, self-governance at any day will be better, and I feel now as a looking from a regulations point of view, there is a lot of focus on it, and the government also wants it to move to self-regulation more and more. The control is less. There is a lot of belief that corporates will do better with the principle that if we caught you doing wrong, then of course the punishment will be severe. And that is again, I think, is the right thing to do, to say that we believe you, we allow you to run the show, we will not interfere into day-to-day business because the premise is that you are not doing anything wrong. But if you are caught doing something wrong, then definitely the penalty should be something which would set the example, right?
So rightly put about corporate governance. In fact, India is the only country where it came in from an industry body. The CII, with their first report, corporate governance came in, whereas, so that's, I think, a very different. And so thanks for that insight. Preeti, any thoughts? Self-regulation.
Yeah, sure. So I tend to agree to what Amit said, that self-regulation is always the best. But having said that, I think India as a country is still evolving in terms of the overall corporate culture. From a governance standpoint also, today we can clearly differentiate, the well-governed companies from the not so well-governed companies. And the companies which are well-governed are getting better and better in terms of the governance standard, even without anyone mandating anything. But I think for a country like India, which is still evolving, not all the corporates are so I would say, thoughtful about governance. Some form of regulation is bound to remain. But I guess, as Amit also said, that over a period, the regulators are trying to ease out things for corporates and are making corporates responsible for their conduct. But I think it's an evolution, and you're going to see this getting better by the day. At this moment, if you ask, I think to an extent, yes, there are regulations. And in fact, if you look at the way some of these regulators have been tightening compliance requirements, it's actually getting tighter and tighter by the day than actually getting eased out. And I think that's coming from the fact that not because of those few well-governed companies, but there are companies which have not taken governance so seriously. And I guess it's just a matter of time when everybody is going to realize how important governance is going to get. Because today, when businesses are growing, the need for capital is also growing. And when you are reaching out to investors, whether domestic or foreign, the only way to differentiate companies is going to be governance. So compliances, governance is going to get extremely critical. And I guess we are moving in that direction, but it's a matter of time before we get there.
Thank you.
If I may just add to what Preeti is saying, the last point Preeti raised is an important point of saying what are the incentives and disincentives of running your business ethically in a well-governed way. And companies who are looking for funding, who have foreign investors, or who know that there may be different stakeholders, tend to then go that path. I think the question is that how do we create those kind of a similar incentives or disincentives for the smaller businesses as well, who may never need the funding. They will still run in a small form because they don't feel the need for that, or they want to keep their spectrum of work that level only. But how do we still create some kind of a deterrent for them or incentive for them when we do their business in a right way? So I think we need to, as a society, we need to identify those trigger points which actually has a persuasive value then for the businesses to follow it. And that's what has happened actually with other businesses as well. And again, sustainability is another classic example where when you've seen now there is a ESG funding that is happening, people are giving importance to sustainability, you tend to then put a lot of focus on that, not only from a compliance point of view, but from a real work point of view. So I think it's about creating that framework of incentives and disincentives where people start taking some of these things a little more seriously.
Thanks. Munnish, you want to add something?
I completely agree with both Amit and Preeti, clearly. And I think India's time has come in terms of even the fundraising aspects of what companies require. So clearly the well-governed ones, and Legasis would know best because it's exceptional in its compliance methodology. So clearly, once governance is there and you have compliance issues taken care of, the leadership team is always seen in a very different and a positive light. And who better than Raheja Group to be able to advocate something like that? Clearly, Preeti's company is one of the most exceptional companies that is run with leadership unparalleled within real estate. As we've spoken recently, just the name Raheja, exudes trust and integrity and stability. So that is an outstanding example of how companies should be governed and compliance methodology is adopted. And we at Rainshine are doing our best to in terms of standing out within the media and entertainment industry on those aspects.
Thanks, Munnish. So Amit, the supply chain would have been affected during the pandemic, and you, as an organization or as an industry, how do you think that they managed to, deal with it or cope with it?
Yeah, I think as I said in my opening remark as well, it severely got impacted, and it required again a lot of systems, processes, ways of doing things to be kind of repivoted to the new ways. And companies did a lot of it. Companies did a lot of it to ensure that people are safe. But I still believe that the front shoulders who were there in this case were the people who were running the factories and who were there in the marketplace to sell goods in the front end, were real heroes of the pandemic period. They were the one who, despite all issues, despite vaccination not being available, despite being challenges on the movement, they were out there producing goods. They were out there kind of selling goods. They were ensuring that goods are available because there was this conviction to say that it's important that these goods should reach to the consumers because they are important for the consumers. So I think we have seen a real great human spirit at that point in time. We have seen people caring for each other, and I think that gives lot of kind of momentum to the whole thing of it moving forward. So people really came together to say, I have to ensure this happen. It is my work. There was no one was telling them possibly to go to market, or there was no force to say that you have to go to the factory because it was okay at that time. But I think people really took the ownership at that point. And so they were the real heroes of the FMCG industries, and they continue to do so. At the corporate level, of course, then companies did a lot of things to give that comfort to the people as well, right? So to ensure that there are medical facilities available, to ensure there are safety protocols which are available, to ensure that whatever we could do within the constraint to make these people comfortable, I think each company did it in there, right? And that really helped the supply chain, both at the front end and at the back end moving. I think government support in this also cannot be undermined. As I said initially, of course, there were hiccups because regulators themselves are not aware what needs to be done. But I think once we got our act right, once we were reasonably aware what are the basic fundamentals that needs to be followed to ensure that both lives and livelihood can be protected and how it has to be done, then I think there was huge support in the entire ecosystem, which helped the FMCG industry to move forward. And I think some of the numbers that you talked about in the beginning are testimony to the fact that after that initial hiccups, it really took off well.
Thank you. So Preeti, the authorities have given extension for real estate developers if there has been a delay in completing the projects. How much of that support has really helped, and to what extent is it being passed on even to the consumers?
Right. So Anita, initially, especially, in April 2020 or so, there have been a lot of policy support which real estate as an industry got from the government. And I think real estate as an industry has been pretty capital intensive because residential, of course, may not need as much, but the other verticals of real estate, whether you look at commercial or you look at malls or hotels or so, a lot of these are highly capital intensive. And if you look at most of the real estate companies have huge leverage on their balance sheets as well. Now, there's huge amount of I would say policy support which the government extended. And, as an industry, we are thankful to the government also for having given that support at the right time. But I think what is important, Anita, and just to answer your question, yes, it has mightily helped several players in the industry which did not have strong balance sheets. Now, what is very critical, if you ask me, and especially when we are talking on resilience, I think, and as a finance person, I can say that optimal capital structures are important and I would also say fund flow management, because when you're faced with such challenges like the pandemic, the very fact for us as a finance professional, I would say, to sustain businesses is to thrive on the right capital structure, because many a times while the businesses are going through challenges, once you have the right kind of capital structure in place which doesn't create those kind of pressure points at these point in times, these actually help you sail through these tides. Similarly, the way you manage your treasuries, the way you manage your fund flow, that is also, I feel, is very critical. And this pandemic has actually taught us how to do that in the right manner so that we can easily tide over these issues. Now, especially in sector like ours, or even for that matter, infrastructure, which are highly capital intensive, in those kind of industries, this becomes extremely relevant. So, of course, the government support which got extended to the sector has been for sure a welcome thing. But, the sector is still reeling under pressure. It's not that we are fully out of it. It will take a couple of quarters before, things start getting to normal, and we are keeping our fingers crossed that we don't have a third wave hitting us. So if all of that goes well, then hopefully in the next few quarters, we should all get back to normalcy.
So the CFOs and all IT heads were the most important during this time.
Absolutely.
To help us. Yeah. So Munnish, if you have to say, who has a greater responsibility, the OTT platforms or the content creators, in ensuring that we don't cross the line?
Really done your homework, Anita, because just had the Producers Guild meeting, the annual general meeting recently, and all the top production companies out of India were part of the Producers Guild, especially in the Hindi-speaking belt and beyond, of course. And one of the issues that came up was exactly the point that you're making, where some stalwarts within the accomplished producers actually felt that, currently streaming networks are leaning on the producers to ensure that the content adheres to certain, aspects that have been laid out in terms of code of ethics or censorship, etc. I don't think there is a right or wrong here because, we work with streaming networks. I think it's a collective responsibility. But one thing is very clear, that I think the Producers Guild in itself has a good number of people who feel that it's important to have a collective voice. And I think you said it quite well, that maybe there could be a little bit of distinguishing between, the theatrical side of viewing, the television side of viewing, and then the digital side of viewing. And on the digital side, as Amit was pointing out for his industry and beyond, and as Preeti alluded to, we can have self-regulation as one of the core mechanisms to manage that. Clearly, between the streaming networks and the content producers, ultimately we're all one, because streamers strive on what they get from content creators. Content creators need their voice to reach the viewers through the streaming network. So it's actually kind of a collective responsibility. That's the way, at least, I see it. So I hope I've answered your question, but it's a good question.
That's the point. I think collective responsibility for anything. I always say responsible is the key word. If each of us operates responsibly, I don't think we need to, be pointing fingers at anyone else, because each one is responsible. So hopefully the third wave doesn't happen. It's being postponed. It's been pushed every time, September, October. Now someone's saying December, January. So I'm just hoping that it disappears. And, so are we going to go back, or are there some changes which have taken? Okay, IT, digital, yes. Are there something maybe personal you feel, something individually you've seen, or for your organization that you feel is going to stay with us and we have changed completely and we would not be going back to the original way of operating or being? And we'll end this with the closing comment with this.
I'm going to go first on this one. I think work from home is the new reality, especially if, many of us, and I think one has seen how quickly we can adapt to certain situations that come in front of us. I think one reality is that we've at least gone to a 4-day week, and that doesn't mean that we don't work on the 5th day. Just means we work from home. That I think is going to be a reality that I think stays. And to whatever extent that one has seen, you can be productive even when you're pushed to the extreme limit. And how just this communication that we're having via Zoom speaks volumes of what lies ahead of us, which is that, what would have been, as Jaideep, the CEO of Legasis, had noted, would have been an in-person, event, is now via the network Zoom. Clearly, so these are path-breaking changes where you can. For example, I spoke to someone yesterday out of the US, and what could have been, in the earlier days, I would have said, "Oh, I need to have a face-to-face meeting." But here was someone sitting out of Chicago speaking with us, and we spoke for almost 90 minutes, feeling as if we were, spending time with one another. So that is the new reality. That the personal reality is that it's what we make out of our interactions that stays with us longer than what we may perceive it to be before the pandemic.
So adaptability, agility, I think these are the two important.
I think just adding to Munish's point, and I think he talked about working from home, I will call it as future of work. I think that's everybody is talking about what future of work is, and now everybody is discussing how the new workplace is going to look like. There are concepts like hybrid, there are concepts like flexible, which are already under discussion, and that's true. I think to some extent, as I said, we all will be questioning ourselves that why in say for example, like I come from Mumbai, right? Why do I need to travel 2 hours a day to attend to the same thing which I can do from home as well? Why? I think that question of why will be there, and I think some of those are valid questions, but it will be a hybrid as well as all of us would agree. Human is a huge social animal. We need human interaction as well. So it is not going to be absolutely 100% work from home. As things open up, you would like to go interact with your colleagues. Have a cup of tea together. I think that gives a different kind of energy. But yeah, the future of work will be different from what we have seen in the past. The other thing is future of consumer behavior, and I hope that some of the things that as consumers and as families we have picked up, like health, wellness, sanitation, some of the things continue to be important. While it's a little disheartening to see that suddenly the hand sanitizer, which was so important, has now started to disappear from the lives and from those bottles which are kept outside the shops as well. I hope as consumers and as society, we continue to give importance to that, because we will be better prepared for the future on that. And I think the last point is what Preeti said, kind of alluded to in the beginning as well, that how companies will look at their risk management and how companies will look at what crisis can hit and how they will be prepared for that. 2 years back, if somebody would have talked about the pandemic get hit and what is your plan of action for pandemic and what is your risk mitigation for pandemic, I don't think any company would have it in their risk management program, pandemic as one of the risks. But now possibly going forward, people will not say that this risk cannot happen, and therefore there will be a more broad-based discussion on risk and the crisis that can hit, and therefore a better preparedness for a corporate and a society to kind of tackle that as well. So those are the 3 things I just wanted to put it.
Just wanted to say that the force majeure clause, suddenly, the moment the pandemic came, people were reviewing it and looking at it. I don't think that was a word which many of us were familiar with. And as you said about the sanitizer, that's become takes prime place in our course. So the lipstick is gone and the glittering sanitizers are in. So it has changed.
Anita, I think for me, on a personal front, I think the pandemic has actually kind of got us to realize the worth of life. We've seen so many of our near dear ones leaving us. I think that's when you realize that in the last 18 months, despite all the money that everybody had, everybody was restricted to home. What have we done in the last 18 months? We've hardly been able to use our money now. I think that's one big realization which should have dawned upon people, that today being together, doing things which you cannot do because all of us are so busy with our professional careers. I think that's something which has dawned upon a lot of people, for me, for sure. On the professional front, on the business front, I think the way people have looked at, especially since I'm part of real estate, the way people are looking at real estate is now changing. Earlier, we had tenants who talked about what amenities are we getting in your park, etc. Today, people tell what are the health and safety standards in the park. So today, that's not given. People want more and more of that for the safety of the employees. So the way our parks are going to be looking going forward is going to be very different than what it was. So I guess those are some of the changes which are bound to come. And I guess in the last 18 months, corporate social responsibility also has taken a different turn. A lot of corporates have come ahead and contributed significantly to COVID, right from helping the government set up hospitals or in whichever way they can help. I think as a corporate sector also, we are going to look at corporate social responsibility very differently, not just because government has mandated CSR, but even otherwise. I think these last 18 months have actually taught us the value of how we as corporates can contribute to the society at large, to our environment at large. So I think these are some of the things which are here to stay now.
Thanks. So I hope lessons have been learned, and the pandemic has been a defining moment for all of us. And you as individuals, your organization, you all have shown resilience. And I really thank you for your time and sharing your thoughts and inputs. I'm sure the audience will love it. And I enjoyed interacting with all of you. Thank you so much for your time.
Same here, Anita. Thank you so much. And thank you, Legasis, for giving us this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anita, thank you.
Thanks.
I would like to thank Dr. Shantaram and the rest of our panelists for this extremely insightful and engaging conversation. You may join our panelists for a live Q&A session in the breakout room.